Welcome back into the blank with Mr. Josh.
I'm back.
Back in the new year. Oh, wait, that will get us canceled off YouTube. Let's not go down that rabbit hole.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. You know what? I saw the strangest thing the other day. So I guess there was a Super Bowl commercial. It was like an old one. It was on Facebook or something, but it was about
Yeah.
hummus. Just nothing but hummus, but it had Ric Flair in it. And it was like, him doing his woo and then like
Mhm.
eating the hummus. But it was a bunch of famous people like TikTokers and all this stuff. And it was all over hummus. And I was like, I don't think I've actually really ever tried hummus. And it didn't look too appetizing, but they made a hell of a good commercial.
I I would say I do enjoy hummus, but it was one of those situations where I my wife and I were actually vegetarian and vegan for about 4 years. And that opened my mind up to a whole lot of new foods. And at the time it's like you're learning what you can and can't eat being, a vegetarian and vegan. So I was trying all kinds of different stuff and found hummus. And there's so many different kinds of hummus, but there's your regular, just plain old, tahini hummus, all that stuff. But I found this stuff that was like there's the roasted garlic and then there's a minced olive, like a olive tapenade sort of style hummus. And if you've got like a savory, a thing for savory stuff, it's really good. But hummus is definitely an acquired taste because I mean, if you're eating it with crackers or whatnot, it's fine, but it's definitely something that I think a lot of people probably haven't tried or don't like because of the stigma around it being healthier or whatever. But I think hummus is actually pretty good.
I think there's probably a large portion of the community of like the plating community where they look at hummus with disgust because does not look good. It is not something I would pick in a beauty pageant if there was a beauty pageant for foods. Like, I mean, you see all these people that put up like their food reviewers. They put up all these amazing like pictures of food. Like you see a melted chocolate Oreo with like a chocolate drizzle going down. It's like picture perfect.
Mhm.
But you look at hummus and it's like, what can I do to spice this food up? And it's like, oh, you don't need to add spice. There's spice in it. It's like, no. I mean, it just looks like I'm staring at like, when you pour a little bit of water into some dirt and it starts to create a little bit of mud. It looks
Yep.
just like that. And I just found out like apparently truffles, I thought it was just something pigs ate. Apparently that's a food that people pay to put on their stuff, I guess. But it
Truffle is
does.
like a delicacy when it comes to cooking with stuff.
But then people say it tastes or makes it smell awful and tastes terrible. I'm like, this is just like cheese. Like, I remember the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life was someone gave me some money to go to the grocery store to go pick up cheese, not just any type of cheese, blue cheese. And I
Mhm.
remember grabbing it. And as I grabbed it, my hand felt moist. And I was like, what the hell? And they're like, oh, yeah, cheese sweats. And I'm like, I just gotta smell it now. You gotta go in for the sniff. And I go in for the sniff, and it was the worst thing I've ever smelled in my entire life to the point where I don't think I will ever, ever, ever look at cheese the same exact way ever again.
Well, blue cheese is one of the most like acquired taste there is out there. And I mean, if you can't get past the smell, the texture, the taste, it's just one of those that's very like, you gotta have a taste for it. I have developed a taste for it over the years, but I can definitely understand people's distaste for it because I mean, I can understand the comparisons people make to it tasting like chalk or whatever, but like, I don't know. It's again, like my palate has changed. I used to be very picky about what I eat. And now I've kind of gotten past that. Like when I was a kid, you couldn't shove broccoli down my throat. Like I would gag if you tried to make me eat broccoli. But now
Why is that the stigma of every kid hating vegetables? I freaking loved broccoli. I love Brussels sprouts. I loved all that stuff. It was just like my grandma would always say, eat your vegetables. And then her saying that to me instilled in my head of I'm not going to eat my vegetables now, but I actually thoroughly enjoy them.
yeah, yeah, I grew up down here in Florida. My mom cooked a lot of country style food, fried chicken all the time, fried pork chops, but we always had our meat, potatoes, and a vegetable. And to this day, like if I'm making dinner for myself, I'm gonna have a green vegetable or corn or peas or something to go along with it. But when I was a kid, any kind of like very hearty, mealy sort of vegetable was just the worst to me. If you really had to get down on it and chew on it, like broccoli or cauliflower or like squash or any of that kind of stuff. I was not about it. But as I've gotten older and my palate's changed, like I was just talking to my wife about this the other day. We were watching something on YouTube. It was a cooking show. And the guy I watch on there uses onions a lot. My wife hates onions, but when I was a kid, I used to think they were the worst thing in the world. Now I can't cook without them. It's just weird how, like, when you're a kid, you really just, you like what you like and you stick with that. I kind of find it sort of weird that nowadays kids are so picky about what they eat that, the parents just give in to like nothing but chicken nuggets and all of that all the time. It's like, come on, you gotta be a little forceful. That's how I ended up learning to like the stuff that I like. And, I don't understand how people can do, well, I mean, I can't understand. It's easy. Like if you just go to McDonald's and get your kids chicken nuggets, that's the easiest thing in the world. It's different than trying to fight with them and make them eat food. So, but yeah, I mean, food has a really weird stigma. It's weird that we're talking about this, but like, everybody says they love food, but there's so much about food that people like and are disgusted by, but it's almost like some people don't give food enough chance. Like hummus is a weird food, but there is good hummus out there. There's just a stigma around it. I don't know. I don't know what it is that people have got to get past to get to some of that stuff, but
When someone says that they have to acquire a taste for a food, I immediately just look at that food like, why the hell would you have to acquire a taste for it? Like, I have to eat it a certain number of times. Like you have to, like, I just picture Sam's Club, and then you're walking into Sam's Club and there's that person that's giving out the free trials of like whatever food it is.
Mhm.
And it's like, you have to acquire a taste for it. So you just sit there with the free sample cups and just keep grabbing them. It's like, I'm on my 10th one, not done yet. And it's just like, you keep going. I look at that. I'm like, that's for me. I'm the complete opposite of how everyone's like, oh, this kid eats specific foods. I was just like, if you went too high and mighty with the food, I immediately didn't like it. Like I remember my grandma used to cook these like extravagant dinners. Like, I mean, you like that word extravagant? That one. I was going to
Yeah.
use that or exuberant, but I thought
Exuberant.
extravagant fit better.
I think extravagant was the better one.
But
Good call on that one.
she would make things like steaks and stuff, but like a lot of like really like stuff that took hours and hours and hours to make, like stuff you would put in a crock pot and would go all out. And I'm just like, where's the fucking hot dog? Where are the tacos? Where's like the easy shit? And she's just like, I spent 4 hours making this dinner. It is like lamb quiche with sliced up gold on top. And I'm like, this is awful. And everyone's like, it's delicious. I'm like, no, I'm so simple. Like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I am fine with. It doesn't take that much. If you cut the crust off, okay, but I like the crust too. But like, oh, that's too starchy. I'm like, that's like the people that don't eat the last bit of the bread in the bag. You ever see those sons of bitches? I don't mean to shame those people, but if you literally see the one last piece of bread and they put it in the thing and throw it away, I'm like, what are you doing? And I remember my buddy's like, you never eat the last piece. I'm like, where are you from? What country and land do you grow up in where it just grows on trees? And I searched it up. The reason why people don't eat that last piece of bread, you know why?
Why is that?
Because it's ugly.
Yeah. Those are the best pieces to make like grilled cheese and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches out of, in my opinion. I love those pieces.
It's because it toasts nice. But then it goes back to the whole thing of like, it's ugly. Hummus is ugly, but people think of that as like a rare food. It's like whenever you go to a party or you go to something, what's the optimal food when you're going to like a tailgate party? What's the first thing you think of that's going to be there?
Yeah, burgers or wings.
Burgers or wings. Okay. What's like a good like snack that you would say like you would have on the table in front of people?
Chips.
And salsa, right?
Yeah.
Who's the motherfucker that brings hummus?
Right.
I brought my own specialty hummus. I'm like, yo, what? Invited you, man? Like, what where do you think we are? France? It's like hummus isn't even from France. It's like, doesn't matter. Whenever I think like, all right, here we go. We talk about foods. Whenever you think of a fancy food, where does your mind go?
Well, since you mentioned France, that's where it's going now.
That's what I'm saying.
or Italy or something like that. Yeah.
Something that seems like it has like character to it. It's the same thing with voices. Like whenever you hear like a British accent, you immediately think proper. But I'm like, a lot of the times they're not even the ones that are proper. And it's like immediately we think Canada. You think, oh, they're nice people up there. You think of maple syrup and all that stuff. That's not true. They're not the best.
No. I mean, everybody has their moments. I mean, you're grouping people into a like, it's that over. I don't know what the word would be for it, but it's kind of populating people. Like the majority of Canadians, you think, that's not what we're about. And, like, again, like a stigma around things.
Do that again. Do that again.
That's not what we're about. But yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, but I do think that people's palate changes. I mean, as I've gotten older and started cooking for myself, I do find that I start to do a little more fancier things than what I grew up doing, like making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and whatnot. I try to spice them up some, like um, try having a grilled peanut butter and jelly sandwich sometime.
See, that's when you start to learn that there's other methods of cooking. Like I
Mhm.
remember when I could use like a toaster oven, or if I put something like in the mic. When I figured out that you could put a slice of cheese on top of just regular bread, put a little bit of pepperoni on there and put that bitch in the microwave for like 10, 15 seconds, your whole life changes. Like I remember doing that when I was like in diapers, like at like 2 or 3, whatever the age is, you still walk around shirtless in the house and not really
Mhm.
caring. I would sit there and just watch Dragon Ball Z in the middle of my kitchen, and my dad would just like be ready to go to work or whatever, and he would just look at me. He'd be like, "Look at you. You got your damn life together, son. You are eating a melted cheese pepperoni sandwich with your shirt off, watching Dragon Ball Z. You don't give a fuck." And I was like, "I really don't, man. Like this is you got to go to work, and I feel for you, but I'm about to watch Goku do a kamehameha."
Do you remember the exact moment you realized that cheese melted and that it changed your life?
Yeah, I do, because I was in timeout at the time. Because remember, this is back in the era where parents or grandparents used to put their kids in front of the microwave, set a timer, and let them sit in timeout. Uh,
Ah, yeah.
Now, that would be called abuse, and what we do now is we just let them get away with it. But the
Yep.
factor of I would sit there and like wow, like it's not cooking anything, but there's still a timer. I'm like, how does she do this magic? And then I remember she like pulled out she's like ham and cheese sandwiches, and I was like, I'm not a big fan of that. But what happens if you just melt the cheese, made it into a grilled cheese? And she was like, yeah, let's do that, and just toss it in the microwave. And then I was like, wait a minute, you didn't pull out a skillet? You didn't do anything to do it. She's like, oh no, this is like what we would say as like a quick way of making a grilled ham and cheese. Now I look back on it, it's just ghetto. It's just like I don't have enough time or caring, willing options to actually grill up a steak and
Right.
cheese or ham and
Yeah.
cheese.
I mean, there's something to be said for convenience. Convenience is key when it comes to food a lot of the times. And I think that's where we've gotten as a society is just we want the convenience of food being ready quickly. So we don't put a whole lot of time into thinking about different ways of cooking food. And that's kind of the rabbit hole I got down this year was watching a lot of YouTube videos of people that cook and stuff. Like I watched this guy called Sam the Cooking Guy on YouTube, and he's just he owns a couple of restaurants in San Diego, has a YouTube channel, and he's like, I'm going to show you how I cook all this stuff in my restaurants. And he just, it's just him cooking food. And following some of his recipes, I've really kind of learned like before when I would cook, I was again being from the South, I'm a big proprietor of cooking with seasoning and making sure my food tastes good. I think a lot of people don't know how to cook properly in the sense of how to season their food properly because you'll get a lot of people that'll cook food, but it just tastes bland because they don't know the little secrets here and there of like either tenderizing food or adding the right seasonings and stuff like that. But this, watching him and kind of doing some of the recipes with him really kind of made me realize how important, like we were saying a minute ago, onions and like just lemon juice can like bring out flavor in foods that you're cooking and make them taste completely different than what you normally would have done.
Uh,
So
But a lot of that takes severe amount of time. And I think like I've talked to so many chefs where it's like a big part of their world is like focusing on the flavors of food, depending on which chef you're talking to. Some really like the idea that a food has to look good before it comes out on a plate. Like they won't eat it if it looks ugly. And I'm like,
not
bro,
true.
well,
Not true.
bro, I've made a peanut butter sandwich with a steak knife and it just fucking shredded the bread just because I was too lazy to look for an actual like bread knife to actually, spread the peanut butter on. And my dad's like,
Yep.
what? Do you even is that even spread out evenly on the sandwich? I'm like, no, there's just a giant glob in the middle that'll end up choking me 5 minutes into the sandwich. And he's like, all
Yep.
right, I mean, you don't want to take the time to actually craft out your meal. And then there's people that only care about like when they do barbecue, they only care about when they grill or whatever to put rubs on it. They want their rubs to stand for the meat and they don't want to put sauce on it. Then there's people that just want to drench it in sauce. You understand, like when I was a kid, I never thought anything would be this complicated. and it goes with everything. It was sourdough bread, anything. But cooking is like one that's like super freaking complicated. Where I was gonna write a cookbook of just shit I used to eat when I was a kid: peanut butter sandwich, crush up Doritos, throw it on there, freaking
Mhm.
animal crackers and a can of tuna. Like shit I still eat now. Like I love
Yeah.
animal crackers. Stouffer liked my tweet on Twitter. I was just like, who the hell's buying all the damn animal crackers during this pandemic?
Yeah, my wife loves animal crackers. Buys them by the giant bag full. We just sit there and eat animal crackers. Or it's like popcorn for us. Like we just sit there and eat animal crackers. There's something about those. Yeah, but I understand what you're saying. It's like the stigmas that surround food really blow me away. But yeah, I mean, there is time you got to put into it. I mean, but I've also, been at a point where I had no idea what I was going to make for dinner, and then just ended up in the kitchen throwing things together and just ended up with a bomb ass meal. You never know. I think some people just don't know their way around a kitchen and don't feel comfortable doing things like that sometimes, because they're unsure of what the outcome will be. You never know unless you try. I've made stuff that turned out awesome. I've made stuff that turned out terrible. Like I've literally thrown it away because it did not turn out very good. It did not taste very good for me. But it's a lot of trial and error. A lot of people don't really want to spend the time doing the trial and error part of it, which is understandable because I mean, food's expensive nowadays. That's the other thing about like to eat healthy nowadays, it costs more. And a lot of people don't, I mean, a lot of people can't afford to eat healthy and buy healthy food. So therefore they're buying a lot of the things that are convenient. They're buying a lot of frozen chicken nuggets and stuff like that. So
Yeah, they raised the recently during the pandemic when it first started. They raised the prices of the produce because I'm buying the same head of lettuce, kale, whatever, cabbage. I mean, just for past 8 years. So then when I
mhm,
walked in and I was like, $1.58 for lettuce, yo, you raised your price 78 cents. And the guy just looked at me like, how the fuck do you know that? And I was like, cause I buy this thing almost every other day. Like it's like $1 for a head of lettuce. Now it's
yeah.
158. I'm like, why is okay? So this is all increasing, but all the other stuff is still staying the same. It's not making any sense when you want a healthy nation. And here's the weird thing. I kind of been studying this a little bit recently, is that they're starting to link a lot with coronavirus and recovery rate, but a lot of it does with your anti-inflammatory system. They
Mhm.
actually figure out that your personality after getting COVID doesn't really go back to 100% normal. You're still dealing with like some fogginess in your head, types of personality changes afterwards. And the reason why is because COVID apparently attacks your, I guess, your inflammatory system, and inflammatory system they're starting to find out is linked to depression. So that's why
Mhm.
a lot of people that do like really like when you eat like 15 donuts, for instance, or something, just like an outrageous amount of food. Like, have you ever just like for me, a milkshake, donut, pizza, all in one sitting? Then eventually you're just like, oh, I need to go to bed. It's like when you eat a lot of pasta,
Yeah.
you don't feel good after eating those. You feel really depressed and you just want to go to sleep and sleep it off kind of. And then you don't feel good when you wake up. And the reason why is because they think that all that is causing your well, not your inflammatory system to inflame. So you're really causing inflammation. So they think that's why with all these primal diets, all these ones that are strictly meat and no kind of carbs that kind of bloat you out and consume water, that it's actually causing less depression. And they're doing a test on that with people that suffer from PTSD to see if they can reduce some of their symptoms by feeding them like a strictly primal diet or something like that. And I'm like,
That's interesting.
science, like what?
Yeah.
What? So I understand why people are, but I just don't get it. When some dude comes out and goes, hold on a minute, I got to let this sit in the crock pot for 2 days. I'm like, go fuck yourself. Sorry, that's not me. I'm the type of guy that's like taquitos in the microwave. You put it in 15 minutes and you go do something else for 15 minutes. You come back, each ones on the ends are hotter than seven hells. But
Yeah.
as you get into the middle, it's just ice cold. And they're like, but if you just rotate them, I'm like, you already lost me. When I read a cooking book and it gives me the first instruction is to preheat your oven for 1 hour before you put your food in, I'm like, cross out one, cross out two, cross out three. What's this one? All right, now we're putting the chicken in the oven and we're ready to go.
Mhm. You like that convenience factor of it.
I just don't like because I think it's just like kind of with you in movies, for instance. You prioritize movies over what a right maybe a normal person would when it comes to like the creating of it, the enjoyment of it. A lot of it's like my issue with how we're going as a society is that we're prioritizing really, really obscure and strange things, not like as hobbies and crafts like sourdough bread or something, but more like stuff that I feel like creates an eventual like hurt to your personality, more like we're investing way too much time in social media. We're
Mhm.
investing all these things that seem like false ideas of what fun is. I think you
Yeah.
start to
Well, I
realize how
mean,
toxic it is.
the COVID stuff has really put us in that position now too. Not to say that we weren't relying on that stuff before COVID hit us, because it has become part of who we are, but it definitely has caused people to get into that now, because we're not, like, I think we talked about this on the last time I was on the show. We're having to find different ways to communicate and be with people again. We're doing it right now. Had COVID not been happening, I don't know if you and I would have ever connected and been talking right now. You know what I mean? Like, we're finding ways as a society to have to communicate through the digital age. And it's weird. Like, I want to go back to being very personable, but I don't know if we're going to. Like, it's so convenient. Like, we're talking about how convenient it is to just throw a taquito in the oven, and then you've got food.
Microwave,
It's
microwave.
or microwave. Yeah. It's the same thing here.
I didn't
It's
learn the
so
oven until 22, so that was a big avenue I missed out on.
I still don't know an oven all that well, and I cook all the time. But yeah, I mean, like, it's a lot more convenient to just say, "Hey, Rob, you want to get on and talk a little while?" And boom, we're doing it. Um, I personally, I don't even know where you're located in the United States, so that definitely wouldn't have happened before COVID time for me. You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I think this is the best avenue of what you can do with social media, but I think a lot of people are not doing this form or just talking. It's why I was creating my app idea, which is like we're forced to talk to people for 1 hour through a Zoom app. You can choose to let it end after an hour or keep it going. You can get into a conversation where next thing you know, you're freaking best friends or something. You don't
yeah,
really know who you could come across. But like what I'm talking about is like in the beginning, everyone's like, I can't wait to go back out to eat. I can't wait to do all these things, be able to sit down and actually take in the time. Like, I wish I could go back in time and slap my younger self just on a factor of how many times I went to dinner with my grandparents and I didn't take the time in. I was not like, I'd just be sitting there at like a TGI Fridays or an Applebee's, and I would be more worried about my phone or more worried about, like, I don't know, just
Mhm.
in my own head about school or something. It was like,
Yeah,
you really miss out on those moments, and like it's crazy because I see them taking out like my younger nephew or something, or my something, little children that we have in our family now. I guess that would be my nephew and niece. But you see that happen. They're taking them out to like all these dinners and stuff. I'm like, damn, I remember when I used to do that. And I'm like, can I tag along with? And it's like, oh, sorry, we're doing that next weekend. It's like, I'm working next weekend. And you start to really realize like the prioritization of things. Like, I would
yeah,
love to, like, if we talk about reconnecting, but that's what everyone was saying during the pandemic, but nobody's doing it. Even though stuff is still restricted, a lot of people aren't still choosing that option of, hanging out with the thing. It was kind of like, well, when we open back up. Well,
yeah,
that I don't know when that's gonna be. So why don't you make the time now?
yeah.
It's kind of like, I'll do that later. It's like, yeah, will you actually do it though?
Right. That's my wife and I were talking. Like, that's the other thing that's become big with us is like, and I'm sure it has with everybody, is I'd love to see where DoorDash and like Uber Eats stock is at this point now, because I'm sure more people are ordering now than they ever did before. I'm guilty of it as well. And we've ordered from a couple of restaurants. Usually when we do the DoorDash thing, it's just some like order pizza, order a burrito from the burrito place or whatever. But we've ordered from a couple of the restaurants that we used to frequent. And it's different because, when you go to a restaurant, you sit at the table, they bring you the bread, you order an appetizer if you want, and then you get your food. So you're consuming a lot more there at a restaurant. Excuse me. And when you get something like that, like delivered to your house, and not only the scenery is different, but you realize just how much you're consuming when you're at a restaurant taking that in and what you're doing here. Because we ordered from a place and they sent over like the bread that you would normally eat while you're at the table and all these extra little things. And that stuff just sits in a bag and you're just going straight to your entree and eating it.
Unless you're at the Outback, then you're tearing up that fucking bread like it's nobody's business. I don't
they
know.
they
I don't know.
send that, like, Outback is a place that we've ordered from a few times, and they send that bread over. And yeah, we do eat the bread because that bread is bomb.
What
But
is that bread, dude? What is that?
it's like a rye, I think,
Oh my
it's like a blend of a rye and a wheat or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but it
I'm
is
not
damn
pro
good.
I'm not pro Subway, but I'd eat Subway if that was the bread they offered there.
uh that's why I don't like Subway, is their bread. I can't stand the bread that they use.
They just don't know how to like stop toasting things. Like, you're
Yeah.
like, want to toast it? I'm like, yeah, I want to toast it. And they put it toasted in there, and it's like comes out, it's like black. You're like, um, thank you. And they're like, you want to toast it again? I was like, no, I really don't. And I'm gonna
Mhm.
take one of those raw ass cookies you have in the front because those
Right.
things are softer than baby shit.
But I like that you brought up like going out with the parents or the grandparents or whatever, like to the restaurants. I mean, I do remember when, and I think a lot of people experience this when they're young and they first get on their own. They're learning how to live on their own and cook and all of that stuff. And you're going for convenience. You're going for ease. You don't really know what you're doing at that point. That's when you really realize, like when you were at home with mom and dad and they were cooking all the time and you wanted to have McDonald's or you wanted to have Burger King or pizza or whatever. Now, like sometimes I'm at that point and I've become a fairly decent cook, not to toot my own horn, but I've just developed a good cooking habit here. But I remember when I was first on my own, those first few years, I would kill to go home and have a home cooked meal by mom, you know?
What's that one meal that's like, I wish I could have that right now, like back how it was. Like, I think a lot of it has to do with the time too. Like,
Yeah.
usually, like if you were gonna ask me what type of food I wanted, probably be like taquitos if I was making it myself. But if I could get something nice made for me, dude, nothing beats a nice clam chowder. Like,
Mm.
I made
I
mashed potatoes one time that came out like clam chowder. It wasn't too good.
That's the things. Like you got to learn how to do those little things. Like, when mom made mashed potatoes, they were just right. They were exactly what you wanted for mashed potatoes. Then you start learning how to make them and they turn out soupy and lumpy or whatever. It takes a little while to refine that. And the reason moms are so good is because mom's done it for however many years and however many different times. Um, with my mom being down here in the South, like a lot of fried stuff. So fried chicken, fried pork chops, stuff like that. And like, unfortunately, I grew up in a family that was a little poor. So we grew up on a lot of welfare stuff. So didn't really get very good cuts of steak and good cuts of meat and stuff. So we just kind of had to make do with what we were getting from the cheap grocery store. I've really started to learn in my adult life what the difference is between all of that stuff, the good cuts of meat, the bad cuts of meat, and all of that stuff. But my mom can make $100 out of $1 when it came to cooking food. Like we would have steak, once a month because that was kind of the thing. Like there was one day of the month where mom would go all out, cook steaks, and we'd all be happy. So, but she would take a sirloin steak and make it taste divine, whereas sirloin steak is
It's a
is a
good word.
terrible cut of steak. Like, it's not like having a filet or a ribeye or something like that, but mom made it taste delicious. So
Yeah, like when your parents would cook you like breakfast for dinner, and as a kid, you thought that was just like an extravagant night. Like you thought like there was going to be this like, oh my god, like what is it like a special day today? It's like no, it's just
mhm.
your parents are probably nursing a hangover and don't feel like cooking anything besides freaking breakfast.
Breakfast is easier than dinner in a lot of cases. Like it's a lot easier to throw together some scrambled eggs and bacon than it is to cook up a big, 3-course mashed potatoes and all that stuff. So I can definitely see I mean, I do it to this day. I mean, the other night I cooked an omelet for dinner just because an omelet's easy to throw together. So we definitely look at it as convenience a lot of the time, but there are days when I'm like, I'm going to have this for dinner. I know it's going to take prep time. So I will set aside that time to do some things. It doesn't happen often. I'm just as guilty as the next guy about, I just want something to eat right now. A lot of the times I'm sitting there just going, what am I going to eat for dinner? I got to find something and I'll throw together a sandwich. That happens more often than the cooking, to be honest, but I do enjoy cooking whenever I've got the time and everything that I need to do it. That's usually where I run into a problem when I'm cooking is I'll decide I'm going to do something and I'll start putting all the stuff together and I'll find out I don't have one of the ingredients I need. And I either have to wing it or I just scrap the whole idea. So
Well, you have to like you just stop the cooking process if you're missing one ingredient.
no, usually I just adapt and do something, make it work somehow, but it depends because sometimes it may depend on the flavoring of the dish. So uh, I tend to muscle through most of it, but there have been times where it's like, oh, the key part of this is orange juice, and I don't have any orange juice in the house. So I throw that idea out the window. So I do get a little methodical when it comes to cooking sometimes. Like if I want something, I want exactly what it is I'm thinking of. And if I can't make that happen, then I do kind of recoup and do something different.
I'm like, I've never had at one point in my life where I'm cooking food and then stopped in the middle of it and been like, I have to go to the store because I forgot this. Like, I know so many people that have done that. And I'm just like, there's nothing that is going to get me to battle the guy in Food Lion and in fucking line because he has 3 items and I have 4. He's like, let me get ahead of you. I'm like, no, man, come on. There's not that big of a difference between our items. And one of yours is dog food. And that's going to take 5 minutes for your old ass to be able to lift that up onto the counter. And it's like, I'm just trying to rush and get home. But that's when life likes to screw you, is when you're like, I just want to do this and I just want to go right home. I just want to get this done and get that done. Every single obstacle pops up in my way. And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm going to have to fight a dragon and kill Conan the Barbarian just to be able to get home.
I am guilty of stopping in the middle and going to the store because I didn't have what I needed. I'm just like that.
You just give up on that food item. What are you doing?
No, actually, I continue cooking. I just have to take a pause. Like there have been times where I've told my wife, I'm like, watch this. I got to run to the store real quick. And luckily I'm not too far from a store, so I can make that happen. Now, where I'm going to be moving to in the next couple of weeks, that might be a different scenario. And I'm definitely going to have to adapt to what I've got in the house. But
are you going out country living? Country living?
Not country, but it's like right now I could literally get in my car and drive to a store and be there in less than a minute. Whereas where we're going to be moving in Georgia, it ain't going to be that simple. It's at least going to be a 15 minute drive to get to a grocery store. So I have the luxury of being able to go, oh, I don't have this. Let me run to the store and grab it real quick here. And so, I mean, like I said, I'm going to have to adapt to that when I get to where I'm going now, because I'm definitely not going to be able to just run somewhere and grab something real quick.
I can understand if you have nothing to do throughout the day to like, you could maybe cook a dinner that would take a couple of hours. Like I went to my buddy's house the other day and his mom was making like a nice bean soup. And I'm not gonna lie, that food was banging. Like it was good. But we ordered Chinese food because my buddy just got off work. So we're like, all right, we're gonna do Chinese food again. So we just got the same exact thing. And as we're sitting there, she's like, you want some of the soup? Want to try it? I'm like, how long did it take you to make this? She's like, well, I've been kind of making it all day. And I'm like, all right. So I took a little bite of it. I was like, wow, this is actually really good. But in my mind, I think cooking should at least be like a 15-minute process. I think because I've done the same thing over and over again. It's simple stuff. It's just, I have other stuff I guess I prioritize, which is like why I try and understand the perspectives of other people, because what could be 15 minutes for you, somebody wants to do that for 3 or 4 hours long. Like I know my buddy used to put smoked meat all the time and that shit would take days.
Yeah. It really just depends on who you are and what you like. I mean, if you're a person that is fast moving and you have priorities and those priorities are not making your meals, I can absolutely see that point of view where it's just, hey, if it takes me more than 15 minutes to make a meal, then I'm out. Some people like when I do get that urge to make something and really want to put some time into it, I enjoy it. I just turn some tunes on, start cooking and start doing what I do. Like, chili is really easy for me, but I mean, that's another kind of a crock pot thing, but I enjoy the process of it. I enjoyed making each individual thing and then throwing it all in and then letting it simmer. And if you plan for those sort of things, it's fine. I mean, again, like that's the biggest thing about a crock pot or cooking with a crock pot is it's really literally just throw stuff in, turn it on. And when you're ready to come eat 2 hours later, you've got food. So I mean, there is prep that goes into that, but again, like if you're a fast moving person, I can definitely understand not wanting to put the time into cooking. I'm usually like that, to be honest, but I just have these sudden spurts where I'm like, okay, I'm cooking a bomb ass meal tonight and I'll sink the time into doing it.
Do you feel it in your bones? Like sometimes when I think I'm about to roll like into like, I feel good right now. I usually feel it on my bones. Like, yo, if I do this right now, like, I know I'm going to play the lottery. I never win though.
I've won a couple of times.
That was the best sneeze ever. I'm keeping that in the recording. Ow, that hurt my head.
Science.
Oh man, dude, I don't know what it is. I hit my buddy's road the other day when I was going to his house. And as soon as I hit his road, I sneezed 8 times in a row to the point where I had to pull over the car because I couldn't drive. I don't know if it's allergies. I don't know what it is, but ever since like, this was just the other day, I've been sneezing nonstop since. Like, it's just, I sneezed in my mask today, and a woman just looked at me like, oh, and you just hear me go, oh my God. Cause it was like I was all in it. And she like looked at me and started laughing. And I was like, that's like the one thing I didn't even realize. Like, you ever spit gum out and then you realize you have a mask on and it flies back into your face. You're like, oh, that's not.
I love how people have different ways of sneezing too. Like I'm one of those guys, like you just did. I'll sneeze and then I'll be done. But my mom is one of these people that, like, when she sneezes, it's at least 4 to 5 sneezes in a row right then and there. I have a friend who's like that too. Those little idiosyncrasies about who we are as people, like, fascinate me sometimes. Just those little things, like if you're a multiple sneezer or just a one time and done sort of guy. Like
It's like how there's different variations of a cookbook. There's different variations of sneeze, but we have to find out different like layups and tricks because of the mask. So it's like, do you do the over and under where you pull the mask up instead of pushing it down and then sneeze under it? Or do you do like you pull it down to the side, you do the one clip off the ear and sneeze out one nostril or something like that? It's like, when I was a kid, when I sneezed one time, I had said a curse word.
Mhm.
And this was before the era before I could really was allowed to curse. So when I did that, like, they looked at me like, what'd you just say? And I was like, it happens when I sneeze every single time. And they're like, what? So then I had to keep that persona up for the longest time to where I actually got it tricked into my brain to where every time I sneeze, I would say a curse word. Like, that was probably the first time in a long time I hadn't dropped like shit when I sneeze or something like that, because I
Yeah.
had been doing it forcefully. And then eventually I just learned to always do it. So I was in the middle of school and I'd be like, bitch. Like, it was so perfect, and everyone would look at me like, "Did you just sneeze and curse?" I'm like, "I did." And they're like, Does that happen a lot?" I'm like, "Every day. Sometimes when I sneeze, if I do doubles, you'll hear like, son of a bitch, and then I'll do double sneeze."
See, my wife is a very loud sneezer, and so much so that it usually scares me when she does it. And it's not like the sneeze is loud, but that one inhale, that big inhale you take before you let it out. She has this like banshee type scream that happens right before that release happens, and it's so high pitched. And every time she sneezes, I'm like, God damn it! Do you have to do that? It's one
Does
of
she
those.
warn you? Like, that's something you got to warn somebody.
No, it's just you're sitting there watching TV or doing whatever you're doing, and all of a sudden, I'm like, God, like, give me a 3-second countdown or something.
That's like one thing though that like I think everyone tries to go as hard as they possibly can on. Like, I usually used to keep it inside, but like now I'm just like, if I sneeze, I want to like make it into like this giant, get the air in the lungs to where they fill up like airbags. Then you
Mhm.
just sneeze as hard as you can to where the whole room turns their head like, oh my God, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just seeing stars and it's awesome.
Yeah, it depends on where I am. If I'm amongst a bunch of people, or I've got something going on, I'll usually be the like, stop it. But yeah, if I'm on my own, or if it's just one of those where it's like, all right, I'm letting this bad boy go. Like, there's something special about the feeling of just a massive sneeze release.
Why do you think that is though? Do you think it's more about like the release you get inside of yourself, or do you think it's your brain subliminally wanting someone to say, bless you? Because that's like the manner tester to let you know if people actually give a shit about you. Because first of all, I noticed you didn't say bless you when I sneezed. So there's just this connection. It's like,
Well,
do I actually want to bless this person, or do I just want to kind of walk away? And then you get the one guy that's like, I'm not religious. You're like, I don't give a fuck. I just said bless you. That's it. That's just what we say.
excuse me. Um, I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, like I'm not a religious person, and it has been instilled in me since a kid to say bless you when someone sneezes. Something in my brain is like, I don't really agree with the religious side of that stuff, so I'm not going to say it. I also have some friends who have raised their children not in a religious household by choice, and like when they sneeze, they don't recognize it at all. Like, a sneeze is just a sneeze. They don't say excuse you or anything like that, or bless you or anything. And it kind of hit me one time when we were hanging out with them, because they sneezed. One of them sneezed, and I said bless you, and they didn't respond or say thank you. And I'm kind of like you, at least acknowledge that I said bless you and say thank you. But then I started thinking about it. I was like, well, if they were never brought up to think that that was a thing, then me saying bless you is foreign to them. You know what I mean?
Crack a fucking joke, man. My buddy sneezed the other day, and instead of saying bless you, I just went Jesus. And I like looked because he did it so loud, it shocked me. And I was like, Jesus, man. He's just like, what? And I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, all right. Like,
Well, that's where me and my wife are at now. We typically, when someone sneezes around us, we say science. And it's, we saw a comedian a few years back, and he was doing his joke, and I think he was talking to someone in the crowd, and they sneezed while there was an exchange going on, and he said, bless you. Damn it. Sorry. He said bless you, or science, whatever you believe. And my wife and I laughed so hard at that joke that since then, whenever someone sneezes, we go science. Just because we're not of the religious type. So therefore it's funny. It's like, that's the last thing someone's thinking they're going to hear whenever they sneeze. They're expecting a bless you, and you just go science. It's just, I find it hilarious. So that's what my wife and I have done over the past probably 10 years now.
First off, I am offended by that joke because I am a Bill Nye hater. No, like, have you ever seen a joke or heard a joke that you remember that has made you literally laugh so hard you could feel your ribs or abs like working through your skin? Because I always been like, oh, that's really, really funny. Or like, I've laughed pretty hard at some jokes, but I saw Lavelle Crawford's special on Netflix like a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Never in my life how I realized I grew up like in what you would call a ghetto life. Because every joke he was talking about, it was like, it was a largely like dominant, like black crowd or something like that.
Yeah.
And he was cracking jokes about being raised in a household like that. And I was relating to every single thing he was saying, like talking about having a crack in the microwave and having to run to the other room to heat your food up. But he cracked a joke that I swear anybody who's ever been to a grocery store with a small child can relate to. He was like, we're going to go to the store. He goes, you remember when your mom used to give you that briefing before you went in the store? Like, I don't want you looking at shit. I don't want you touching shit. And I swear to God, if that shopping cart hits the back of my heel, 2 chops to the throat. And I'm like, that's my life. Like it made me laugh so hard where I literally thought like I couldn't breathe, dude.
Yep. I've heard a variation of that joke. I can't remember. It may have been the same comedian. I'm not sure, but yeah, I'd heard something to that effect. It's like when you would go into the grocery store with your grandma or whatever, she would stop you at the door and go, when we get in here, you don't want shit. You don't touch shit. You ain't getting shit. Yeah. I have a joke. I'm a very big fan of Mitch Hedberg, rest in peace. And this is at a time when I was driving a lot for work, and I was listening to Sirius satellite radio all the time, and they had a comedy station. And it's not like they would have a comedy channel where they wouldn't play like a full thing of comedy from somebody, but you would get little snippets of comedy throughout the day. And I had never heard of Mitch Hedberg before. And his little thing came on, and the first joke in the little segment that they played was, I saw this wino and he was eating grapes. And I'm like, dude, you have to wait. And it's one of those that's like, you don't get it at first, but as soon as it hit me, I was laughing to the point where I thought I was going to piss myself. And to this day, like I've been a fan of Mitch Hedberg ever since then, because he kind of just throws out one-off jokes. He doesn't really have like a setup in a kind of like your normal comedian does. He really just gets up and just tells one-liners. And my wife and I have gotten to the point where usually every day we reference some sort of a Mitch Hedberg joke, because they're just little stupid bouts of nonsense that interject into everyday life.
I know the grape and wine connection, but I don't think I get the joke.
So a wino, a guy who drinks wine all the time, if he's eating grapes, he's eating them before they've fermented. So if he's eating grapes, you have to wait until you can get to the wine. And that's kind of the genius, I think, of the joke, is if you're not familiar with the process, it could take you a few minutes to kind of get it. But it was one of those where when he told the joke and I heard the punchline to it, it was one of those where, you ever hear something, you hear it and you take a rest and then you go, oh shit, like it hit me like that.
Yeah, there was an episode I did with the guy from Chris from Digging in the Dome. He's wearing a Wu-Tang shirt, but it had Ric Flair's face posted on it. And I was like, Wu-Tang. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And like a minute later, I was like, oh, shit, Wu-Tang. And it was like 20 minutes into the episode, you just hear me go, oh, fuck.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And I mean, it's just, and it's stupid jokes, but again, like Mitch Hedberg had this just gift of just telling stupid jokes that made me laugh so hard. He's like, I got an oscillating fan at home. It looks like the fan is saying no. So I like to ask it questions a fan would say no to. Do you keep my documents in order? Do you keep my hair in place? Do you have 3 settings? Liar. Or like, it's like it's like he would ask it a question. It would say yes. And it's not something you would say yes to. He's like, now I'll pull the pin up and you ain't saying shit. Like just stupid stuff like that just tickles my funny bone.
That's a guy who spends a lot of time like thinking of shit, or like, if he wasn't a comedian, like if he didn't go by like a stand-up comic, you ever notice like if some people didn't have comedian in their name and they tell you a story, it's like you're fucking nuts. But since it's like you automatically assume since they're a comedian, it's gonna be a joke. So you're like, okay, that's okay then.
Well, it's funny because he has a joke that's like that. He goes, as a comedian, I'm meant to make up things that are funny. He's like, so a lot of my day is sitting there writing down jokes. And he's like, or if the pen's across, damn it, I keep burping. He's like, if the pen's across the room, I got to convince myself that what I wrote ain't funny or what I thought of ain't funny. Like, so it's like, he thinks of something funny, but if the pen's too far away, this kind of relates back to the cooking aspect of things of convenience. He's like, I thought of something that's funny, but the pen's way over there. So I got to convince myself that it ain't funny because I don't want to deal with going over there and writing it down.
That's the best advice, because I used to spend a lot of money on Dragon City on my phone. It's a stupid freaking app I've been playing for probably 7 years now. And I remember I would spend all this money. I'm like, damn, dude, I'm spending like $50 on these gem packs. And my buddy just goes, fucking really? I'm like, yeah, dude, it's a deal. It pops up. It says, oh, don't miss this exclusive offer. He goes, do yourself a favor. Keep your bank card or your wallet in your car. And I was like, why? And he just goes, because trust me. Just trust me on it. And I was like, all right. So one night it's like snowing out 30 degrees or something. I'm in my boxers. I'm playing Dragon City and the thing comes up. I went to go hit the purchase thing for the app, like, oh, just buy this small little gem pack. Next thing I know, it pops up, says, enter your card information. I'm like, my card's in my car. And I don't really feel like going to get my card. I was like, I'll do it in the morning. So then I close out the little app thing, wake up in the morning, and I was like, why was I thinking about buying those gem packs? He goes, you see, you stop yourself from those Amazon purchases at 2:00 in the morning when you rack up a bill of $4,000. You realize why your bank card's fucked.
Yeah. Well, now that they've put the cards on the phone for you, it's just they've eliminated the whole thing. That's where I've gotten myself into trouble, is having a card on your little Apple Wallet or whatever it is you may have on your phone now. It's just like the money's already there. Just buy it. So that's a great idea, though.
I helped that out with my nephew. He was playing like Clash of Clans when it was really big. And I was like, all right, I'll give you my card to put on the thing. No more than $5 purchases. Like just don't spend more than $5. He didn't spend more than $5, but he bought a lot of shit that was like 99 cents, where I got a bill of like $100 and something. I was like, what did you buy? He said, you said I couldn't spend over $5. I was like, no, don't spend more than $5. I was like, okay, hang on a second. Now I have to think about that, because you did follow the rules, but you're also a little shit. And It was like this whole thing. But I just think, if a kid's going to do that and he's going to really think of it that way, I just clap my hands in amazement. Like, all right, you got me. Like, that's why I think if I was a parent and my kid like pulled one over, you ever had a moment where your kid or something, or you're a kid and you pull one over on an adult and it's like, you're just an adult, and to kids that means like you have all the answers, and then you realize that doesn't mean shit, because you are just an average person.
That's something that's really kind of I've seen as I've gotten older, is when you're young, you think you know everything, and even though your parents or the adults around you have been alive longer than you, have seen more than you, done more than you think, what do you know? You're not me. And I've kind of seen that a little bit getting older now, and actually working with younger people in my jobs and stuff. Because I've got a guy I worked with for quite a few years, and I call him my son. He's about the age, like if I had a kid when I was 20, he'd probably be around the age it would be now. So like, but he reminds me a lot of me. And even though I know some of the stuff that, like, I'll tell him something and I'll know I'm right, he wants to argue with me about it. It's so funny to hear that with younger people nowadays, and how they constantly want to argue with you about things. And I remember one particular instance, he was like, we were talking about movies, and he goes, yeah, I remember I had that movie, and it was like, you had to flip the tape over after you were done with this and blah, blah, blah. I was like, VHS tapes didn't work that way. You don't flip them over. It's just one tape. So if you had two tapes worth of a movie, you'd have two tapes. And he just kept on wanting to argue with me, like, no, 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 I had this one tape. You flipped it over, and then you saw the rest of the movie. I was like, you're not right. But he continued to argue and argue and argue with me about it.
There's a VHS tape that does that, the Nickelodeon movie.
Really?
Yeah, there's a one, it's an orange VHS tape, but you flip it over and there's a whole other part onto the movie.
Huh. I have never seen that, but the particular movie we were talking about was not the Nickelodeon movie. So I would love to see that, because I to this day have never seen that. I've seen the orange tape, but I didn't know it was something that you could flip over and play both sides, like kind of like a cassette tape. But
I was just entering out of the realm of like VHS tapes. Well, I was kind of the big era for me was like, oh, that's when DVDs became a thing. You know what I mean? It wasn't
yeah.
super big on VHS tapes. That's why when I go to like thrift stores, I always find like weird ass stuff where it's like I like to buy records, like
Mhm.
old school records, and nobody has a record player, even though they're like they sell them at BJ's, dude. It's insane. They sell like the new refurbished record players to play the old stuff.
Yeah.
But I was like, I would take these records, whatever, and I have a bunch of them posted in my studio, but I have a bunch in my room just lined up against the walls and stuff. I'm like, this is the art is fucking phenomenal on this. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's what I like to enjoy about. Like, I admit, like you said, like a lot of times younger generations like to think they're right all the time. I admit I don't know shit. I'm just like I'm out here trying because I think like depending on what that information that person has, they might have more than me or they might have this. It's just like I'm ready to hear it all out, but I've only been to confined, I think, to two things in my life where I'm like, this is how it is, and this is 100% how I feel. Like I've never felt
Yeah.
any stronger about like kids should get free lunches, or I've never felt any stronger about like we're all kind of just people. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think we've entered that point where I like that you brought up the records and how that's coming back, and a lot of people are collecting vinyl again, and the artistic side of it, because that's one thing that kind of cemented us in starting our podcast and being fans of movies, is going back and reminiscing about what it was that brought us to that point. And it was a lot of it with movies is going to a video store and seeing the box art on the wall and being kind of overtaken by, what is this movie that I'm looking at this art for? And I think now, even though VHS is a dead
Medium.
dead medium, like we have this affinity for it. And I think it's because it's in our, there's something artistic about it to us now. Whereas having a VHS tape with that box art and everything, it holds a place in our memories and our hearts of something that was a simpler time and something that we cherish. Even though I'm a big fan of movies and buy Blu-rays and all that to this day, like there's still nothing like finding an old VHS tape that you have this memory of seeing in a video store and going, God, I remember wanting to rent this movie so bad because I saw this box on the wall. Kind of same thing holds true for vinyl and stuff like that. I mean, I'm starting to see cassette tapes become a thing now. And cassettes were a big part of my childhood, and my love for music was I had so many cassettes, and then it turned into CDs, and now physical music stuff is no longer a thing. I have bought a couple of CDs in the past couple of months though. That's sort of weird. I haven't done that in a while, um but yeah, it's those sort of things have now become like priceless art in a way. And it's just weird how those things that we, like you said earlier, stuff that we took for granted back then, we're starting to realize really means a lot more to us than we originally thought.
Now, are we loving it because it's old, or are we loving it because it seems like a lot of the things I like will rebuy, like stuff from the past, like nostalgia. Everyone's trying to capture that nostalgia feel. I think
Mhm.
that's also because we're growing and we're rapidly progressing so fast that we're not actually having time to sit down and really kind of branch away from our childhood a bit of the time. Like I remember I was working at this one job for like, I mean, I was making good money. I didn't have a whole lot of bills. I was still kind of living for free. So all I had to worry about was like getting food for myself. And that's
Mhm.
really, and putting gas in my car. So
Yeah.
eventually I was getting so much money saved up that I was ordering fucking Bakugan off the internet. I was ordering like Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I collected like, I mean, I still have 8,000 Yu-Gi-Oh cards in my garage right now. And then like 50,000 Magic the Gathering. And I've never played a single game of it before. So it's like, I was just doing it because I had the money to do so. And cards were like 2 cents a piece. But eventually it was just like, I remember someone asked me, like, "Why are you buying all this childhood shit?" And I'm just like, "Because honestly, I think I have an affinity still for it because I had to grow up so fast. Like, you sold all
I'm
of it
right there
before I
with you.
finished it."
I'm right
Yeah.
there with you. Like I grew up in a poor household. So everything we got was secondhand. So the things that you really wanted, the things that you saw your friends getting that were cool, you didn't get. So that's kind of where I was at with things. When I became an adult and started working and had access to adult money, there was definitely some things that I bought just because I had the money to buy them. And I still kind of am like that to this day. Like I don't have kids, so I don't have to budget for making sure the family's okay. Like obviously I have bills to pay, but like I'm of a point, like if I see, like, case in point, I'm a big fan of the Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters cartoon that was on in the 80s. And I remember as a kid, I got the real Ghostbusters action figures. They're little, like 4-point articulated, little tiny action figures, but I loved them when I was a kid. And if I still had some of the toys I had when I was a kid now, I'd probably be rich for the for just what people are paying for old school toys nowadays. I'm a big collector of that kind of stuff, but they just did a new, like a re-release, and they're doing like this vintage style, and they're releasing them on, like, the cards that they're released on look exactly like they looked in the 80s. The figures are modeled exactly like the 80s ones. So it's just this piece of nostalgia where I can go, holy shit, like I can have this now and look at it and go, I had that shit as a kid, and I was so happy when I was a kid and had that stuff. Um, I was a big He-Man fan when I was a kid, and I literally, like, when I say this, a lot of people tend to over exaggerate and say, oh, I had everything. I literally had every single piece of He-Man stuff that came out when I was a kid. If there was one thing I had when I was a kid, my grandfather made sure I had my He-Man toys because I loved that show as a kid so much. So that was the one thing for me. And now it's starting to make this resurgence, and they're releasing, re-releasing action figures on the old 80s action, or on the old action cards. And like, part of me is like, God, I would love to buy all this, but I had all of this shit as a kid. It's like, I really kind of wish I just had all that stuff that I had as a kid still. But as you grow up and that stuff becomes unimportant, it gets filtered out. It goes to thrift shops and all that stuff. But that's one thing, as younger people nowadays have, or as people have kids nowadays, I have been telling my friends who are having kids, like, make sure that they realize just how important these toys they have are to them. Cause in 20 years, they may be going, damn, I wish I still had that, you know? Um,
If you
I
wait,
mean,
so if you could go back to in time, you could bring something back to the future. Would it be that?
for me, it would be all of my He-Man stuff, just because I literally did have all of it, and now the nostalgia people have for it and the money people would pay for it, I could probably make a fortune. But then there also lies the dilemma of, do I keep it because it's so important to me, or do I get rid of it because people want to pay exuberant amount of money for it? There's that aspect of it too. But I'm not the biggest, like, I love nostalgia and I love remembering stuff like that, but I also don't like to hang on to things. Like, I'm the first person to say, if I don't use something, I'm getting rid of it. So I'm weird like that. Like, if I have a very vivid memory of something, I'll tend to hang on to it. But and my wife is completely different. Like, she holds on to things for a long time because she has memories of where they came from, why they're important to her. And it's stuff like clothes or things that she will probably never wear in her life again, but it's stuff that just, is important to her. So her and I bicker a little bit on that kind of thing, because I'm of the opinion, if you're not going to use it, get rid of it. But then I also see that aspect of it's got important value to you. You hang on to it for a reason. So it's a weird little place to be in. But I'm also like, I love, like, right now we're getting ready to move and there's nothing in our house, and I love it. But we have so much stuff. Like, we had to pack up a lot of our stuff, move it to storage in order to show our house for selling. So a lot of our stuff is in a storage unit, not here in the house. And it's been so easy to keep the house clean, stay organized. And like, but when we have all of our stuff here, it makes it so much more difficult. And now I'm like realizing, do we even need all this stuff that we have packed up, because we're living just fine without it? And I'm actually a little more comfortable. So there's a lot of life dilemma you run into when it comes to those sort of things, especially material things.
Yeah.
I have an extensive toy collection, extensive movie collection, and it takes up a lot of room and it takes up a lot of my time to keep it all organized and up to date.
But it looks damn
And
good, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Like when I go in, like when I've got it already, set up and looking good, I'm like, damn, this is nice. But also like, I got to think about how much time and effort I got to put into it. A lot like we've been talking about cooking, if you really want to have a good meal, you got to sink time into it. If you really want to have this nice, collection of movies or a nice collection of toys, you got to sink time into making sure you get it set up to where it's, you're happy to look at it and you're happy to show it to somebody.
I bet you got a movie collection like most people have a spice rack where it's just all sorted and out on display looking all nice, don't you?
Well, up until I think when we did our first recording, when you and I first recorded the first episode together, I had just cleaned this room out. So this room actually, the wall that you're seeing on video, like over here, was covered in movies, and even the one that the TV is on that I'm looking at you on now, that one was covered in movies too, and it was like alphabetical, and then I had certain ones where I set them off to the side and certain editions that just look really nice together. So yeah, like you take time and curate and like make it look something where it's like when somebody comes in and goes,
yourself.
Yeah, like I know where everything is, but plus like if someone came in here and looked at it, they go, wow, like you got a lot of movies. So I do like being the movie guy. Like I like when people come to look at, or like I had a friend of mine come over and guest on our podcast during this time. And it's weird to say that considering what we've been doing all of, like my normal guest, it's me and my wife. And then I have two friends that we do this with. We all do this over Zoom, but I actually had a friend come over and do it here in the house, which is weird in COVID times. But when he came over, he saw my movie collection and he was just like, we were in here recording and doing the show, but he's constantly just looking around at the walls, like looking at all the movies and stuff. And it's like, it was almost distracting to him because he's just looking at all the movies and stuff that I had. So, but I like that. I like that someone can look at my collection and go, damn, he's got a nice collection of movies.
Yeah, I know before I had this setup that I have now with like the microphone and then I'm on a desk in a different chair now. Like if you look in the past, like a lot of it was just like, my computer was sitting on like a little stool and then I was on top of like a really small coffee table. Then I was sitting in a really crapped out chair that I found like clothing or a furniture store was actually getting rid of a bunch of like office chairs. So I was like, I'll take one, started throwing 3 of those in my Holly Kia Soul. Kia Soul. I don't know why I say Holly Kia. I think it's because that fucking commercial. But I remember like that to me, that was still comfortable. People are like, don't you want a better one? Don't you want a better one? I'm like, not really. I'm like, I'm as just like I am with my food. I'm very like low budget person. Like I don't need all the professional stuff to have a good time. You know what I mean? It was like this whole, like, these were like kind of gifts in a way, like for Christmas and all that. So it was like, I appreciate them, but like, I don't need that. I prioritize other things. Like if somebody needs to go to the hospital or something, we need to focus money onto that, not buying just a bunch of random shit. And people are like, but don't you care about your quality? I'm like, dude, the quality is in the conversation. It's not really the whole key fact of how many nice tools you have.
That's what really set a lot of people back and like keep people from doing things like this is they feel like they've got to have certain things in order to make it happen. Whereas probably some of the best podcasts you'll ever hear started with people with a USB microphone and a laptop. That's it.
Some people off a phone.
Yeah. Just recording a voice note on your phone and then putting it out for the world to hear. Like if you really want to do something, you'll make it happen no matter what it is. And if you continue to do it, you're going to get better. The listeners will come, the equipment will come later. It's just, if you really want to do something, just start doing it. Make it happen. That's kind of what I'm a proprietor of right now is like, if you want to do something, make it happen. It's not hard. If you really want it to happen, just make it happen. And yes, there's all kinds of different aspects you have to look at. Like I have pretty decent equipment when it comes to our podcast, but we could be doing this with something a lot less. I just happen to be fortunate enough to be able to start off with something like this. Like my background in music helped me with having microphones and having the equipment to be, or, the programs in order to edit and stuff like that. So for me, it was literally just, I need a couple more microphones so we can get people in here recording and we're good. So, it really just, I think a lot of people put a lot of stock into what people are going to think of you if your quality is bad or if you don't have certain equipment or something like that. Like, no, you don't have to have pro equipment. You don't have to have a Shure SM7B to record a podcast.
Damn, that's the fucking mic I have.
And I have one too. I don't use it for podcasting. I use it for music, but it's like, and that's the backside aspect of a lot of this is they see people using that kind of stuff and they think, oh, well, I've got to have that in order to be as good as them. And no, you don't.
Well, what
It's just
defines
it.
it's like what defines your character? I mean, like right now I'm looking at my mic thing that I bought. It was for four mics. It's a Behringer, whatever 110 or 404, whatever CD or something like that. But the
Mhm.
one thing I really enjoy about the character of what it is about it is the fact that I have the people that I've talked to through the podcast, from hot sauce people, have their stickers on there, have a couple friends who are beekeepers on there, just people I've met through the podcast to give it that character. But at the same time, I have a fucking Buddha sitting on top of it that I bought at a thrift store for like $2 with a vinyl CD of Meatloaf or a vinyl
Yeah.
record of Meatloaf. So it's like, to me, that adds so much more character than like, it's so weird because I think objects hold memories. I
Mhm.
really believe that to a T. My old table before I had this one had coffee stains on it, had knife marks on it. I remember the knife marks came from my buddy who, his episode on the podcast, he was telling me like he's going to be a dad and he was really nervous and there was this dark time.
Mhm.
It was like this, it had such like, I mean, it had at least 600 episodes soaked into that table where it was like there are fucking just times and days and just different moments where I didn't know what the future was going to look like. And if I look back on it now, I was like, I would have never expected it to turn out this way. I would have never. And I think that's the important part of like, it's like wearing a favorite shirt. It has your fucking scent in it. It has who
Yeah.
you are as a person. It has character in it to you. I think that is like that with any single object. And I think people should try their, even though it is uncomfortable to try new things, but don't lose the old stuff. You know what I mean? Just because you're moving up to an upgrade, do you
Yeah.
necessarily need that upgrade, or is it something that like the other one still stands the test of time, like a movie?
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's kind of where a lot of things stand for me. Like I'm not of a physical nature when it comes to that stuff. So, but I understand what you're saying. Like when people have a t-shirt that they've worn for years and they love that t-shirt, they love the band that the t-shirt or the band logo that's on it or the movie or whatever, like whatever that move that particular thing holds true to your heart, like that's what keeps you hanging on to it. I've always been the kind of person that just hangs on to the memory of things and not necessarily the physical side of it. But there are things that I keep that I'm just like, that has deeper meaning to me and I don't want to get rid of it. But I'm very, very selective when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Think clothes for me or some things I'm like, yeah, I'll just put this away somewhere. Then I end up wanting to dig it out later. But
Yeah.
when it comes to like objects that I use, I'm so basic with the stuff. Like I never want to go and buy new stuff. I always just cherish the old stuff that I have because
Yeah.
I'm an expense guy. I mean, I grew up in a house where it was like trying to like always save your money because you could save up for something like a rainy day or some type of stuff. But it was like I thought Malto Meal was the basic brand of cereal for the longest fucking time, and then people are like, no, that's the off brand. That's like the store generic. I'm like, but what's the difference? Because I get
Yeah.
store bought or whatever Great Value Raisin Bran. It is $2 cheaper than the actual stuff, and it has way more fucking raisins in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's that sort of stuff is really weird. Like, yeah, there's not much of a difference in buying a box of Raisin Bran or a box of Great Value. I mean, eh, Great Value has it right there on the box. It's a great value. It's the same damn thing you're going to buy, and it's $2 cheaper. So, yeah, I mean, eh, I don't know where this notion of the name brand stuff is better than the other has come from. Now, there are certain things that I think are better than going the cheaper route, but in most situations, the stuff that's not name brand is just as good as the regular.
Yeah, never buy like cheap hygiene stuff. Always go for like whatever you like or whatever works, even if the
Yeah.
price is a little too expensive. What is it? Never pay for bad drugs. You never know. Um,
Right.
but it kind of goes back to the concept like you mentioned before. Like I remember one time I wanted to be vegan. I wanted to try it out. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember when I was like, all right, so what are the things to be vegan? Because I was like drinking the Great Value cream soda from Walmart, best fucking soda you will ever have in your life. Shout out to them. But I was drinking it and it said gluten free on the back, and I was like, I guess I'm gluten free. It's like this whole thing. It's like, yeah, but what else do you eat? It's like, oh, I guess I'm not. But I remember I tried to be vegan, and my buddy was like, yeah, you just got to give up the main thing you love. And I'm like, what is it? He's like, eggs. I'm like, fuck it, not doing it. Sorry, I'll go
Yeah.
pescatarian. He goes, you still can't do eggs. I'm like, is there a diet where I can just have like tuna, animal crackers, and eggs? Like, is that such a hard diet trend to start? Adkins started one. Good God.
Pescatarian would allow for that because that's fish. That's vegetarian with fish. So, and vegetarians eat eggs and cheese and dairy products and stuff like that. It's not until you go into the full vegan that it's just like, if it came from an animal, you don't use it at all.
Like that goes into lipstick. That goes into like
It goes into
anything.
everything. Yeah.
That's fucking horrible. How hard is it? That's what I'm saying. I like my buddy's vegan. I took him out like to eat at like Applebee's or something. He's like looking at the menu for 55 minutes, and I'm like, can we just get him water? Like, and he's like, is the food going to be prepped near anything that's animal produced? I'm like, why do we even go out to eat? We could have went anywhere, like to a fucking bowling alley. He goes, yeah, but sometimes you got to check the balls to make sure they're not. I'm like, check the balls.
Now,
Fucking check the balls.
Now, being around a lot of vegan people when me and my wife were vegan, like you have to be able to adapt to life in general and not like, that's the thing about veganism or even any kind of extreme way of thinking in that sort of lifestyle is, yes, you have your views and you believe what you believe and you don't want to endanger animals or whatever that is, but you also can't be the kind of person that is like that. Like you are looking over every little nook and cranny. You're looking at every single hair on the head of your passion to find those things, because you're only making it a stigma for the people who don't understand you. It's like when you go, if you're a vegan and you go somewhere and you go to Taco Bell, like get the bean burrito. Okay, it's a bean burrito, but are the beans in, are the refried beans in the, do they have the, what is it? Are they cooked in the fat or are they the vegetarian beans? Like it goes into a lot of that sort of stuff, but you have to be able to go like, even though I have this diet that has these restrictions on it, like I am still a normal human being. So like I will eat a bean burrito, even if that means there might be a little bit of lard in it. Like you have to show that there are options to live by. Like being vegan now is a whole lot easier than it was 20 years ago because people have started to think about that lifestyle and like how you can make it easier for people and the convenience of it. You see a lot more vegan stuff in stores nowadays because it's become a bigger lifestyle for people. And that's the thing. You've got to change the stigma on that sort of stuff. Like I'm not like, if you're a vegan, you're crazy. I was a vegan. I decided it wasn't the lifestyle that I can continue to do and be like, it wasn't convenient for me. I still really am a person who stands behind the thought behind it. Like I'm an animal lover and I don't like the fact that animals go through what they go through to become part of our meals. But like, you really start to have to weigh like, how much is me being vegan going to change that? And some people think it will, some people think it's not worth the time. Like, but be conscious of what being a vegan is. Like some people find being a vegan as radicalism. And like PETA even takes it far enough to become terrorism to some people's views.
They took freaking the animal crackers on the boxes. They took the animals behind bars in 2014. They let them out in the open. That's why whenever you see animal crackers, they're not behind bars anymore because of PETA.
Yeah. No, I mean,
I'm like, who gives a shit? I understand animal cruelty, but I've been to a chicken plant. I know what happens to my food. Do I think we need to fix a lot of the issues? Hell yes, I do. I don't like the idea of force feeding animals. I saw where they had force fed a dolphin before.
Yeah.
It's really disgusting how we treat that. But I look at it like it is, if you understand where your food comes from, if you've been to a chicken plant, if you see all the crazy shit that goes down, you're still willing to eat. I think that gives you a better opinion or a better judgment on how much food you're going to consume. Like instead of making a whole plate of chicken, only eating 3 of it and then throwing it in the dumpster or something. Right. When you know where it comes from and know the process of how it gets made, you start to have a little bit of a thing to your head where it's like, maybe I'm only going to need 1 or 2 of these chicken breasts rather than cook up the whole damn thing just because I can't.
Well, we're coming around full circle here because like, I love the fact that I was vegan for the time that I was. It made me realize a lot of things, realize things that I didn't know, and try a lot of different food that I never would have tried before because I didn't have a whole lot of options. So I had a lot of time sinking into research, and I wouldn't have ended up being a fan of hummus if it wasn't for being a vegan. So And I think that's where I developed a love for like a lot of the vegetables that I like now. Broccoli, case in point, we talked about earlier. Like you start to learn what you can and can't eat and what you have to do to make yourself feel nourished with the foods that you probably never ate before. So you start to learn what kind of hummus is good. Some hummus is good. Some hummus is not very good. Like it took some trial and error of buying hummus to find out which one I liked and which one I didn't. So that plays into my palate now when it comes to eating. Like when I have a steak, I'm going to have broccoli with it because when I was a vegan, I learned how to like broccoli, even though I'm eating a piece of meat with it now. So it helped me educate myself, but it also helped me realize that it's not something that I could sustain myself doing.
Yeah, you got to find what works. I just think when people sit there and say you should be, I'm like, it doesn't work for everybody. Some people our bodies are so uniquely different that finding one diet trend that fits for everyone is that's impossible.
Well, everybody's so hung up on diets, quote unquote, and it's just like you really just have to find your own lifestyle, what works and works best for you. Like a diet, like I've seen something in like, I
Well,
don't
like a
remember where.
diet's like if I'm gonna pick a food to eat off of right now, and
Yeah.
it is gonna be based on a diet, I would have to pick something that would do mainly fish because I live in a town that is nothing but fish. If you are going to get red meat here, it's very, very expensive because the fact of we are a beach town.
Mhm.
So everything we have is Maryland crabs. It's all these types of like there you go. I just circle back around. That's where I live. I live in Maryland. But everything is seafood related. So it's so much cheaper here to get that than it would be if I went to Tennessee and tried to get seafood. For them, it would be like, oh, you're going to have to buy red meat or something.
Yeah, it's same here. Like I live in Florida, so seafood here, and I live right on the Gulf Coast. So seafood here is always available. Good seafood too. Like, and you get a lot of people in life that don't like seafood because they live inland and they're not near the places where fresh seafood comes in daily. And like when you have fresh seafood as opposed to stuff that is not fresh, there's a big difference there. So
Yeah, my
like I
buddy's from PA. He's a past guest, Mikey Bowser, but he came to PA or he came to Ocean City and I visited him. I was like, oh shit, we did a podcast. Let's meet in person. So we
yeah.
went to the beach and everything, but he went to go out to get his first crab. He's never eaten crab before. And he had to Google or YouTube a video of eating a crab and people are just laughing at him here. Because I knew that before I came out of the womb, dude. Like that was like a simple task in my head. But for him, he's like, but do you know how to do this with meat? And I'm like, I don't know what the hell you just said. You said was it Cesar, whatever it is, where it is, or you flame it or you broil it or charboil or something. I'm like, I don't know what the fuck that means. I've never tried that on a burger. I'll George
Yeah.
Foreman that bitch. Slam it down.
Yeah, I mean, getting into cooking like I have lately, like I've started to learn all these different types of ways they do things, like with steak and meats and stuff. Now, a popular thing is the sous vide, which is like it's not boiling, but it's like you put your meat in hot water for a certain amount of time, so it pre-cooks it, and then you just sear the top and bottom of it, and then you serve it. Whereas before, it's like a reverse sear sort of thing.
That's the
Whereas,
fucking word. That's the
yeah,
word I couldn't find. That reverse sear. What the hell is that?
it's you cook the inside of the steak and then you sear the outside and then it's done. Whereas before it used to be like you would have to sear it and then let it cook more in the oven. So now you're doing it in reverse. You're putting it in hot water to let the inside cook and then you're searing the outside. It's just reverse.
You're talking to a guy that pulls his chicken out of the oven, cuts the inside of it, sees it's a tiny bit pink on the inside. I'm like, fuck it. I don't have enough time to sit there and let it cook even more.
Yeah. I mean, it all comes with knowledge. Like chicken's a great example of something that people don't know how to cook very well. That and pork, like if you cook it too long, it dries out, therefore it tastes bad. But if you cook it for the right amount of time and don't cook it all the way through, like a lot of people will do meal prep. If you cook chicken all the way through till it's done and then you like heat it up in a microwave, that's why it's rubbery and chewy and doesn't taste good. The key to cooking chicken and like prepping for something like that and like microwaving it is you cook it to almost to the point where it's almost done, but not quite. And then when you microwave it, it cooks it the rest of the way. And therefore you still have a nice juicy piece of chicken. So you just got to learn the theory.
Science.
Yeah. You got to learn the science behind it. It's just, if you're fine eating dry chicken, then go for it. That's your thing. But if you really want to have your food taste good and not be like you're eating leather when you're eating it, you got to learn how to do little things like that.
You don't like to taste the leather?
Nah, I don't chew on leather too much.
Then you're not a whiskey fan because some of that stuff tastes like leather.
We were talking about acquired taste earlier, or developing a taste or whatever. Like beer and alcohol is one of those things for me. Like everybody says you have to acquire a taste for beer. Well, I've been trying to acquire a taste for beer for 40 years and it still tastes like piss to me. So
I
I'm
won't
just
drink
done.
beer. I won't drink beer. I'll drink whiskey, and the only reason why is because I have like screwball whiskey tastes like peanut butter, but I mix it with like a slushy kind of thing. So what I do is I pour it all like maybe like the other day I grabbed 5 bottles of the miniature Jim Beam like vanilla, and I
Mhm.
dumped it into a blender, and then I mixed it with A&W root beer, mostly root beer, and then I just put ice in it and slushied it up, and then froze it, and then drank that, and it was like drinking like a if you go to 7-Eleven and put beer in it, it's the same thing
Yeah.
kind of. I'm like, it's just to me, that's like as far as I go with alcohol. I don't need to go to parties and drink like a whole bottle of Jaeger or something. I'm like, I'm good, man.
Yeah.
I'm a easy keel type of guy. I like to remember my night.
I'm all about flavor. So like if something tastes bad to me, I usually and no beer anyone's ever given me has tasted good. I have found like ciders and stuff that I like that are good. Like there's a place here that my wife and I used to frequent a lot called the Craft Bar. They have a pineapple cider there. And I love that. I could sit there and drink multiple glasses of that and be fine. But you give me a stout beer or something like that, it just is not a taste that I enjoy. So I'm not going to drink it. When you're young and you're wanting to hang out with your friends and party and all that stuff, you're shoving that stuff down your throat just to kind of hang with the crowd. But I've never been a fan of it. And it comes a certain point in your life, you have to realize like, I'm never going to like this no matter what I do. So why keep putting myself through the torture? You know what I
Why
mean?
are we playing games?
Yeah. Like, well, I mean, I say that. And then I say, I used to say the same thing about coffee. Like there's two things you're born with a taste for, coffee and beer. And I've recently found myself drinking coffee every morning, but it's because I have found a coffee that I enjoy the taste of. Um,
Oh, I don't like coffee black. I put like coffee syrups, those syrups in them.
yeah,
I like Irish cream, but I drink pots of coffee all day, and it's like they just don't hit me. Like I've had probably 6 energy drinks today, and I'm still tired of shit. It's just
yeah.
caffeine has never worked on me because I just naturally have like a high level of energy.
I'm the same way. It really all boils down to taste. Like, I mean, you've probably seen me. I mean, I'm drinking Monster. I drink Monster all the time. And it's not that I need it to stay awake. It's just that it tastes good to me.
That's what I'm
Uh,
saying.
the caffeine in it does nothing for me. I'm just so accustomed to caffeine that I don't I think I could drink 6 of them right now and not feel anything. Coffee, I have seen an effect on me, but I think it's because I'm just now getting to where I'm drinking coffee. But I found this stuff
Wait,
called
what effect does it have on you?
I do find myself getting jittery if I drink more than a couple of cups of
I thought you were
coffee.
going to talk about like a laxative effect. I was like, the way my brain thinks of it is that it's so hot, it's burning off the insides of your intestine, like the bad junk, and it's helping it come out faster.
Well, that was another stigma of coffee for me was I live in Florida. It's hot all the damn time. And why am I going to drink a hot cup of coffee when it's 90 fucking degrees outside?
Ice that bitch.
I've just recently gotten into iced coffee and but again, like it was all in finding the right flavors because whenever I would try coffee before, like you go anywhere and have a generic cup of coffee, it just tastes like burnt water to me. Like it didn't have a good flavor. But I found a very strong flavored coffee that I enjoy. So now I don't mind getting up and having, especially now that it's cold a little bit, getting up in the morning, having that cup of coffee, and then I'm fine. But I do add, cream and sugar to it, but it still has a nice, pungent, strong coffee flavor. It doesn't taste like burning water to me anymore. I've actually found a flavor that I like.
We talked
So,
about melted cheese in a microwave on a sandwich can change the game. You
yeah,
ever try cold hot cocoa?
no.
Dude, that changes the game. Every time since I was a little kid, I've always burnt my tongue on a sip of hot chocolate. Same
Yeah.
thing with that and anything that comes out of the oven. I
uh,
can't wait. I can't. When you pull out pizza, I'm like, grab a slice. It's gonna be hot. I'm like, I fucking know it's gonna be hot, but I can't really stop.
we keep reverting back to like jokes I've heard from comedians. Like there's a comedian, Kyle Kinane. He has a joke that's like how people do that kind of stuff. He's like thinking in normal terms of things. He's like, no, it's not normal to put something that's steaming hot in your mouth. It's like but when you're cooking something, it's like your first instinct is like, oh, this is burning my flesh. Well, then quick, put it in your mouth. It's like, it's one of those situations where it's like, that's not going to do any better. You're just going to burn the flesh off the top of your mouth.
There's
So
one time I've cooked something and I've seen it like hurt somebody, and then I've actually like for like maybe it's like kind of like having a near death experience for 2 weeks. You're kind of changed. My
Yeah.
dad had like cooked hot dogs, but he threw one in the microwave for like 2.5 minutes and then walked away. And as like the microwave's smoking, and he
Yeah.
grabbed it with his fingers and dropped it. And my fucking small little dog runs over and eats the whole damn thing in one bite. And this dog, I have never heard anything scream in that much pain. Like it was like when you swallow like a burning coal or something. You could hear her just screaming and rolling on the ground, like it looked like she was having a seizure. I'm like, oh my God. My dad's just like, I don't know what the fuck to do. Like he's trying to grab water and pour it on her mouth and everything like that. He goes, well, she swallowed it. It's inside. Like she's gonna have to drink water, but she's too busy screaming on the floor. It's like for 2 weeks after that, I was like, I'm gonna be careful with whatever comes out of the oven. And then I got over it. And I was like, look, if it happens to me, then I'll be the one that's having a seizure on the floor.
Yeah, I've burnt the roof of my mouth so badly a couple of times that it's really tempered me to go, okay, don't don't eat this right away, because to me there's two things that really suck: tooth pain and like burning the inside of your mouth.
Dude, you're playing a
Because when
violin to my heart right now with my cracked tooth I have.
dude, like tooth pain is the absolute worst thing in the world.
Dude, my gum right now, like you probably can't tell from the video, but this whole thing down here is completely infected. And he's like, what do you want to get taken out? I was like, let's do Monday. He goes, okay, I'll have you Monday next week. And I was like, I got like major mouth pain right now. Like it
Yeah.
really hurts to even talk as I'm talking to you. And then he's just like, well, I'll give you a couple painkillers to get through. I was like, okay. He gave me 2 days worth. I'm like, bro, you set this out 2 weeks away. Like it's
Yeah.
not, it's, you don't realize how, like at this point, it's completely changed my mind to start really taking care of my teeth a lot.
Yeah, I let my teeth go for a while because when, like I said, growing up poor, we didn't have insurance, so therefore I wasn't frequenting a dentist like I should have been
I
as a
can
young
relate to
person.
you so much right now.
And when I got into my 20s and actually started getting insurance and had capability of going to the dentist, it was like, oh yeah, you've got some major issues here that we got to start getting fixed. My teeth appear to be fine if you see them, but there's some issues there, which I've corrected a lot in the past few years. But I had one of my molars in the very back had a very bad exposed, or it had a very bad cavity and exposed a nerve. And I took a sharp, like you take a sharp breath in your mouth, and it hit the air hit the nerve of that tooth that was exposed, and it sent me to my knees. It hurt so bad, and I'd already had an appointment ready to have it surgically extracted because it was like impacted, and it was one of those where it sent me to my knees, went to the emergency room. Again, they can't do anything for you except give you painkillers. By the time I got to the emergency room and actually got a painkiller, the pain had gone away. But it was a situation where it was like, went to the surgeon that I was going to have it extracted from. I went to them the next day. It was like, listen, this happened to me last night. You're going to take this thing out. We're going to reschedule an appointment for sooner because I've got to get this thing out of my head. Like, and tooth pain has been some of the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. I just, and if you're going through it right now, I feel for you, my friend.
It's that I'm afraid of. And then I've also heard kidney stones are very painful. I'm like, I don't know if I want to deal with that either.
I have been lucky enough to not have them, and knock on wood, I don't want to get them, but
I
I'm a
used
prime candidate for it because I don't drink enough water.
Yeah, I
But
used to freak out all the time because I remember at my buddy's house, he used to spend summers up there, and I would always hear his dad screaming at like 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, and his dad was in the war, so I was like, I just thought it was PTSD or something. It was like the weirdest thing because he would walk around in his underwear all the time. So like he would just come downstairs, grab something from the fridge, like shirtless, and his whole half of his back is different skin than his rest of his body.
Mhm.
And I was like, so afraid to ask. Like I didn't ask
Yeah.
until like 15 years later. Like when I was like 18 years old, I was over there and I was like, dude, you got to tell me the story about the back, man. Since I was 5 years old, I've been coming over here trying to
Uh,
figure out how the hell you got that. And I kept thinking, oh, you were in the war and something happened. So I never brought it up. And I was like, so how did you get that? He goes, dude, when I was a little kid, I was playing with fire and I fell and burned my whole part of my back. So I got new skin when I was like 9. I was like, I thought you got that in the war. He goes, no, I didn't get that in the war. I just go, I've lost respect for you. He goes, what? I'm like, nothing. I'm like, nothing. Uh, but every morning I would hear him scream. And I finally asked my buddy when I was sitting down at breakfast, I was like, dude, I've been over here for like almost the whole entire summer. And every morning your dad screams. Like, is he okay? Does he need therapy from like the war?
Just because he's pissing rocks.
And he's like, no, my dad has kidney stones. I was like, what? He goes, he used to drink a lot of soda as a kid and he pisses out kidney stones like every morning. I'm like, oh my God. It's funny because I had his mom on my podcast and I was talking to her. I was like, so what do you do? I've never really understood what you did. And she's like, I'm a therapist. I'm like, oh my, it's like your brain connects all the fucking times I was over there as a little kid. And like, she was just like very patient with me. And like a bunch of times where she was like, well, why, how does that make you feel? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I remember we found $100 outside in a frozen kitty dog pool, like the ones you'd wash your dog in. And it was like, I remember we're jumping on the trampoline out in the snow and someone just goes, I found $100. I'm like, what? And they just look over and it's frozen in the snow. So we dug out the corners and we split it 3 ways, which was like $33 each. And then my buddy got the extra dollar since it was his house. And I remember we're all sitting there and his parents come home. My buddy tells his parents and his dad comes in and goes, yo, I lost $100 in the backyard. And I just looked at him. I was like, you're bullshitting, dude. Like, you're messing around. That's fake. He goes, yeah. He goes, that's crazy. You guys found $100 there. We're like, yeah. And she just goes, what'd you guys spend with your $100? My buddy, I mean, we're like 10 or 11 at the time. So the main thing was we went to the video store, bought a bunch of sour heads, airheads, whatever the nerds rope thing, and then bought a bunch of hot fries with the detective on the front. And that's how my buddy spent his $30. I bought Webkins like a fucking idiot. And I bought a bunch of them and just started like, oh, I got all these Webkins. And then his mom goes, so what'd you buy with your money? I'm like, Webkins. And she's like, so how does that make you feel? And like, when she told me she was a therapist when I had her on, she's like episode 50. I was like, that makes so much sense. You asked me that weird ass mind manipulation bullshit questions. She's like, what do you mean? I just wanted to get to know you better. And she's the only person in my life that's ever called me Roberto. I don't know fucking why, but she just always calls me Roberto. Like, what are you doing, Roberto? I was like, nobody calls me. You're the only one. And for some reason, you're like doing some like therapist trickery now that I look back on it, like some witchcraft where it's somehow pleasing me.
Yeah, I had a similar situation. Like I didn't have somebody trying to give me therapy about it, but I remember going to the bus stop as a kid. I wasn't even a kid at this point. I think I was in middle school, maybe right at the beginning of high school or something, standing at a bus stop. And then I looked down on the ground and there's just like dollar bills and like tens and ones, like blowing in the wind on the ground. And I was like, oh God. And so I started like chasing the money down the road and picking it up. And I think I found like $23 worth of money. And at this time, like it must have been the beginning of high school, because I remember in high school, we had the regular lunches that you would get in school, but high school had the little carts where you could get pizza or Chick-fil-A and stuff like that. But you had to pay for that.
What fucking school did you go to?
My high school here had the regular lunch program. They had they had a salad bar. They had the regular lunch. I think there was a hot lunch and then another variation, which was all part of the school program. But they were also like had a deal with Pizza Hut and Chick-fil-A, where they had little carts around the cafeteria and in the courtyard where you could buy slices of pizza and Chick-fil-A sandwiches.
Was your fucking school district in France or some shit? That's something. We had a microwave in our school and it got ruined after like 12 days or something, because some fucking kid brought in some curry lunch or some shit. Whole damn lunch smelled like ass. Next thing you know, we don't have a microwave anymore. So people are like, where's my microwave? I'm like, dude, all I'm here for is the school pizza. And when they put out that Cloverland dairy milk, because some kid always puts their Cloverland dairy milk off to the side. I'm like, you're a dumb motherfucker, dude. This is like drugs in school.
I was, again, like the poor kid. So I was always on the lunch program, but whenever I came across some money, it was like, oh, today I'm buying a Chick-fil-A sandwich. Well, I found all this money at the bus stop, and I was at the bus stop early for whatever reason. And my bus stop was right across the street from my house. So I ran into the house and told my mom, I was like, I just found like $23 on the ground. She's like, oh yeah, well, let me have that. Like, wait, what? Like the sheer fact that me finding money never kind of came across that my mom would ask me for it. But I still have this vivid memory where I was like, oh, I'm going to eat good for lunch for the next couple of days because I just found some money. But my mom, being poor, was like, oh, we need that for something. So like convinced me to get handed over to her. And it was like, well, shit. Like, and so from that point on, it was like, I had to think about like, should I tell my mom that I found some money somewhere or like came across some money or whatever? But yeah, that is a vivid memory in my mind.
Should have been like, I would have hand that $23 over if you pry it from my cold, dead hands.
Right. Well, it's funny because getting older and sort of like putting together things from your childhood, like my mom and my stepdad were very big smokers, and like that was priority. Like always when the paycheck came, it was prioritized enough money for cigarettes, then food, and like it was that kind of thing. So I'm sure that $23 went to cigarettes and then maybe something else, but it was cigarettes priority over that. So that's where a lot of my kind of stigma for that sort of stuff comes from, is that it was something that I grew up with, parents having priority over those things over other things that should have been a bigger priority.
You just gave me
And
the best question to ask a teacher who's been involved in the school district for like the past 20 years.
what's that?
What's the difference between, like, how many times did your parents smoke in the car with you where you would be like in third grade sitting down smelling like cigarettes, like Pall Malls? Like, I want to ask a teacher, what's that like when that day hit where you just would walk into your class and not smell fucking cigarettes? Because the kids, like, there's a big trend of like no smoking with your kid in the car anymore.
Yeah. I mean, my parents smoked around me all the time. They didn't give a shit. And like, that's what made me not become a smoker, in all honesty. Like seeing what we went through, being like in a poor family, and like cigarettes being a priority, like that just made me like put this thing in my brain where it was like, I can't go down this road. I remember finding out one of my teachers was a smoker one time, though. Like, and that's how big of a thing it was in my head about smoking was a bad thing. Like, when you're with teachers, you just experience them in the classroom. You never really put together like they have a life outside of a classroom. So I remember like I was driving away from school one day and I saw one of my teachers in their car driving away and lighting up a cigarette. And I was like, oh, like I couldn't believe it. Like, oh, like it was one of those, like maybe like for some reason I was thinking only my parents smoked in the world or something like that. But it was just kind of weird to me to see a teacher smoking. I was like, when do they have time to smoke? Because I saw my parents just lighting up all the time. It's like, how do they go the whole day without smoking cigarettes?
I had a more drastic experience. I had, when I turned 18, went to this store called the Red Light District, which is like a porn shop.
Yeah.
I saw my fourth grade teacher in there picking up a double dildo. And
Oh,
I was like, yo, what happened to all the Garfield shit used to have on the walls? Like, oh, I guess Garfield really does look like a pair of tits.
we're different people behind closed doors, sir.
That's crazy, man. Oh my God. That's what I'm saying. It's like this world is, yeah, whatever you think it is, it's probably never is 100% of the time. There's always something else, always new information, always something that completely just reverses your train of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so young and naive when you're a kid and don't pick up on that stuff, and then you get older and start to realize how the world really works. And that's one thing about parenting that kind of gets to me is a lot of people treat their kids like they've never done any of the stuff that they know their kids are going to do, and like chastise them for things. And it's like, motherfucker, you were his age 20 years ago and you know exactly what he's going to do. You know, he's going to tell you one thing and do the other. And like, just this whole thing of parents telling kids that they didn't do things when they were younger is a line of bullshit. Like,
I don't like it the other way though, when they invest themselves into their kids. Like, don't make the same mistakes I did. I'm like, I'm not you. We're not in the fucking 80s. I'm not putting bleach in my hair, turning it blonde like a fucking idiot. Like,
yeah,
I know so many times they're like, I know what you're gonna do. It's like, you don't know what I'm gonna do, because I'm not like every other 20-year-old you've ever met. My go home, go to work podcast. That's fucking it. Like, I
yeah.
don't go out and party and stuff. She's like, I know you're gonna be driving. You're gonna be. It's like, no, I'm not. I really on that sounds like tasking to me. The fact of like driving somewhere and then partying, like, oh my God, that sounds like I got to talk to people and shit. Fuck that.
Well, that's a lot of why I was so sheltered as a kid. Like it's weird because I was sheltered about certain things and certain things I wasn't. Like we've talked about this a lot on my podcast. Like I was watching R-rated movies at 4 years old and stuff that I probably shouldn't have been watching, but my mom had no care in the world that I was watching it. Yet, like I wasn't allowed to go across the street to a friend's house because they were so afraid I was going to do something I wasn't supposed to. And it's like, why do you assume that I'm going to do something so bad? It's because you did bad shit when you were a kid. I don't know. This also comes back to the young people thinking they know more than older people. It's like, you don't know what I'm going to do. Well, I do know in some sense what you're going to do, but are you going to do it the same way I did it? Or are you going to be you're smarter about it? Like there are two sides to that coin.
I'm going to drink my boba tea and judge you silently. That's the new generation excuse.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, Josh, we're about to head up on that 2-hour mark. So Spotify does not like me hitting 2 hours. So it just makes it hard. I don't know why they don't make it easier for me to convert a file. They're like, sorry, the file size is too large. I need to find a better process.
Right. Yeah, I understand, man. Yeah, uploading our episodes when they run over, like we've done a couple episodes recently that were like 215, 230, and it's like, come on, let's get this process going. So
I got clam chowder in the oven and shit. And they're like, oh, no, hold on a second. The file doesn't work. I'm like, oh, my God. Let me get my saltines at least. Jesus. They all tied me over till that Outback bread comes by.
Well, I appreciate you having me on again, Rob. It was a fun conversation. And again, just anytime you need somebody to talk with, I'm here, man.
You know it, man. Josh, where can they find you?
VHS Files Podcast. That's where our show is at. Any platform, any social media at VHS Files Podcast. We just released our episode talking about John Carpenter's The Thing last Friday, and we will be releasing our Trimmers episode this coming Friday. So that's where you'll find us, VHS Files Podcast. Check us out.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank Podcast.